Siberia, August 1914. Rasputin lies in his hospital bed, recovering from the assassination attempt while trying to stop a catastrophe. The Archduke Franz Ferdinand has been murdered. Tensions are rising, and government ministers are arguing over whether or not to mobilize. Day after day, Rasputin telegrams Emperor Nicholas in St. Petersburg, sending 20 messages in all, trying to influence him, begging him not to take the action he so fears. Do not go to war over the Balkans. He says it will only bring disaster, that it will be the ruin of Russia and bring danger to the imperial family. No good can come from it. He appeals to Alexandra, who behind closed doors has hour-long arguments with her husband over the question of war. Yet as he lies in his hospital bed, Rasputin gets the news. The First World War has begun. He won't live to see its end. Thanks so much to Skillshare for helping to keep the history flowing. When police questioned Rasputin's would-be assassin, they quickly began to suspect that she'd been put up to the act by Iliador, a suspicion that only hardened once an informer told them that Iliador had paid the woman and tried to acquire explosives for a series of terrorist attacks. They came for Iliador at his home, but he fled via a tunnel dressed as a woman. A month later, he was in Norway writing a book about Rasputin called The Holy Devil. Meanwhile, Rasputin began to spiral. Already hounded by press and police attention, there was now the added stress of both acting as a spiritual advisor to a royal couple at war and the fear of assassinations. He started to become more the man his enemies made him out to be. Now, Rasputin had always had mistresses, and it appears he did sleep with followers and sex workers. But as the war continued, this got more brazen. The secret police logged him visiting sex workers, sometimes twice a day, and he openly propositioned society women. Also, while he as a pilgrim gave up alcohol, Rasputin resumed its use upon coming to court, throwing massive parties and starting to appear drunk in public. At one point, he became so intoxicated on a train that people could look into the window of his private compartment as he vomited, passed out, and wet himself. And while the most infamous stories about his behavior during this period are fabrications, the real stuff was bad enough. He also gained unprecedented political influence, since Nicholas was frequently off visiting the front, leaving Alexandra with few close companions she trusted for guidance. In fact, Rasputin was in the imperial couple's lives non-stop. He wrote Nicholas with advice, telling him to throw his weight around as monarch, and even proposing policy. He suggested, for example, to delay the second military draft until after the harvest to minimize the impact on peasants. But Nicholas disregarded Rasputin's advice frequently. For instance, when he chose to take personal command over the army, a move that went against Rasputin's advice to stay close to home. But to be fair, everyone knew that was a bad idea. Nicholas was already seen as weak and incompetent, and this would tie his reputation to a conflict that was, in every way, not looking good for Russia. Rasputin was far more successful exerting power through Alexandra, a power that mostly consisted of getting allies appointed to government offices and his enemies removed from them. Sometimes for good reason, like mistreatment of religious minorities, but at other times simply because someone's presence in power made Rasputin feel unsafe. And when opponents did cross him, he increasingly threatened to take it up with the Tzar. But the thing was, Rasputin wasn't being paranoid. They really were out to get him. More press campaigns hit him in 1915, but this time with a new and dangerous element: the claims that he was a German spy, pushing Nicholas toward peace with the Central Powers. A particularly toxic accusation, given how he was now so associated with Alexandra, whose already low popularity had dropped even further due to her German heritage. One Duma member, Vladimir Purushkevich, went so far as to give a speech calling the royal couple marionettes of the evil genius Rasputin, and saying that Alexandra had remained a German on the Russian throne, alien to the country and its people. The speech was purposely incendiary. A year before, demonstrators had called to have Alexandra banished to a convent, and mobs had killed ethnic Germans in Moscow. Purushkevich was playing with fire, but a fire that drew others. Because after this speech, Purushkevich found himself approached by Prince Felix Yusupov, one of the richest men in Russia, who invited Purushkevich into a plot to kill Rasputin, along with himself, an army officer from an elite guards unit, and Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich, the Tsar's cousin. December 29th, 1916, Yusupov Palace. A cold night in St. Petersburg, a good night for a housewarming. And that's what Rasputin has been told this is. a celebration of the palace's renovations nearing completion. Prince Yusupov, a man who has come to him for healing, getting close to him for years, ushers him into a basement room with a gramophone playing Yankee Doodle over and over. Before dawn, Rasputin will be shot 3 times. That's the only thing we know for sure, because the only accounts of that night come from people who have every reason to lie, to shift and spread blame, to make Rasputin out to be a monster whose killing was justified by his demonic refusal to let death take him. Prince Yusupov's account, the most famous, claims that he served Rasputin cyanide-laced cakes and tea. Yusupov says that he sat there in awe as Rasputin gobbled them down with no ill effects. Next, he says, he plied him with poisoned wine, which again did nothing. A man prone to believing in the supernatural, Yusupov began to panic. He says he went upstairs, got a revolver from other conspirators, and then returned, telling Rasputin to look at the crucifix before shooting him once through the chest. Stashing the body in the basement, the group dressed an army officer in Rasputin's coat and drove the man to Rasputin's apartment so witnesses would see him going home. Then they went to move the body. But when Yusupov lifted the corpse, it came alive. Rasputin, wounded, clawed at his would-be killer, then scrambled to his feet and fled into the snow of the courtyard, the assassins following. And that is where Grand Duke Dmitri put him down with 2 shots, one point blank through the forehead. Then, with it perilously close to dawn, they dropped him off a bridge into a river through a hole in the ice. Now, it should be noted that historians don't generally believe Yusupov's account. It doesn't match up to the memories of other conspirators, and Yusupov himself had a lifelong fascination with theatricality, melodrama, and play acting. And there are plenty of other theories. But one thing most everyone can agree on: these guys were in no way professional killers. They'd never murdered anyone before, and because the post-mortem examination found no trace of poison, it's been suggested that Yusupov's supplier hadn't even given him real cyanide. Instead, the whole thing, from start to finish, seems like a drunken botch job by aristocratic flunkies. Alexandra insisted the plotters be shot, but Nicholas quietly transferred them to the front or confined them to their estates instead. And when word spread that the police had pulled Rasputin's body out from under the ice, people came to the river where they found him and scooped buckets of water as if it were sanctified. It was an expression of the old Russia, one that did not have long to live. For 2 months later, when winter food prices led to looting and police opened fire, riots broke out. The February Revolution had begun, and by March, Nicholas had abdicated and was living under house arrest with the provisional government in charge. In October, the Bolsheviks seized control. Of course, this would have likely happened without Rasputin. After all, with 1.7 million Russians dead in the war, hunger throughout the country, and an aristocracy refusing to modernize, there were more than enough historical forces to drive change. But there's no doubt that Rasputin played a role, providing a concrete figure the opposition could rally against. And once he was removed, the criticisms he'd absorbed for years instead fell personally on Nicholas. In looking back, it's hard not to think of Rasputin as a figure of our modern age. One who, whatever the truth, had his public image defined through partisan press, conspiracy theories, and the distortion of fame. One whose memory could be defined by men like Iliador and Yusupov, who had both literally tried to kill him and then wrote books about him, casting him as a wicked advisor or fairy tale sorcerer who brought down a monarch. Ultimately, Rasputin serves as a warning against being seduced by a good story, one that's too cut and dry to be true, because history isn't like that. It's messy, full of contradictions, often told by people who are unreliable, deeply biased, or that don't know the whole story. And if those stories work hard enough, they can change a man in the eyes of history into one who never really existed. Which just goes to show you how powerful people's creativity can be. And on that note, I think it's time I checked out more courses from our friends over at Skillshare. For the uninitiated, Skillshare is an online learning community featuring thousands of inspiring classes for creators, letting you explore new skills and deepen existing passions. Plus, since Skillshare is curated specifically for learning, that means there are no ads like this one, and they're constantly launching new premium courses so you can focus on wherever your creativity takes you. Lately, I've been trying to figure out exactly how really awesome logos tick, and found the class by Aaron Draplin, Logo Design, Secrets of Shape, Type, and Color. Not only was it useful as heck, but it helped me get some ideas out of my head and into production. Another great course I clicked with was Creative Writing for All, a 10-day journaling challenge by Emily Gould. which taught me to notice new details I could use in my writing, and really helped me get some ideas out of my head and into production. And since I'm always trying to utilize my time more efficiently, I turned to my old Nebula pal Thomas Frank and his productivity masterclass, Create a Custom System That Works, which not only helped me get hours of my work week back, but also really helped me get some ideas out of my head and into production more efficiently. Are you sensing a theme here? New show. Sorry. Something in my throat. So whether you're a dabbler or a pro, a hobbyist or a master, you can discover what you can make with classes for every skill level, all for just $13.99 a month when you sign up for an annual plan. Though if you want to get really creative with a sweet deal, the first 1,000 of you good beans that click the link in the description below will receive 1 entire month of Skillshare absolutely free. So you can learn something today you didn't know yesterday, all while supporting us at EC at the same time. Creativity for the win. That's right, Zoe. Ahmed Ziad Turk, Alicia Bramble, Casey Mustia, Dominic Valenciana, Joseph Blame, Kyle Murgatroyd, and O'Reels1 are fantastic legendary patrons.